Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Our motto is educate, enlighten, entertain. And this morning, our special guest is Alison Cork, who was awarded the MBA for her services rendered for women in the business world and also as entrepreneurs. So good morning, Alison. How are you?
Hi, Lillian. I'm very well. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I got real excited because I'm not sure how it's going on in the rest of the world, but being a woman entrepreneur in the United States is still an Achilles heel. So could you please tell everybody how you got involved with helping women entrepreneurs try to regain their territory?
Absolutely. Well, really, you've almost put your finger right on it straight away. It was because when I started in business, which is back in the 80s, so to sort of frame that politically, the first prime minister I was really aware of as a role model was Margaret Thatcher, our first ever female prime minister, as it happens. But back in the 80s, I started my first business as a student, as an undergraduate, because I'd fallen into debt and I needed to make some money. And I was too frightened to tell my father that I'd spent my student grant on other things. So I had, there was an imperative, there was a need. And long story short, as I started my business, I realized that I was very well suited to it, that I enjoyed being a businesswoman, but equally, I looked out there into the marketplace and there were no role models. I mean, I could count them on, fewer than five fingers. So there was, for instance, Anita Roddick of Body Shop. You may have heard of her. There was Sophie Merman, who ran something called the Tie Rack. And then we had a wonderful lady called Debbie Moore, who founded a dance studio called Pineapple Studios. That was the first ever business to be quoted on the female-led business, quoted on the London Stock Exchange. And she is actually a friend to this day, which is amazing. But, that's not many women. And I then got heavily involved in running my businesses. I have had 30 years of running businesses. And more latterly, as I was thinking, well, I'm quite a mature businesswoman now. I know what I'm doing. What else can I do out there to try and make a difference? And I realized that actually we hadn't progressed that far, that there still were very few female role models. And I wondered why. So being a curious person, as most entrepreneurs are, I started to ask questions, and the answers that came back were very interesting. Women don't start businesses because they lack female role models, because they lack confidence, and because they lack networking opportunities. And I just thought, you know what, that's not, whilst that's a shame, those things in themselves aren't insurmountable. And maybe if I come up with an idea to overcome some of them, I can help increase the number of women who run their own business in the United Kingdom. And that's how the journey began.
I think that's excellent. I know that in the United States, we have something called the Good Old Boys Network. And a lot of boys, young men, are initiated into it very, very early. They're given a spot. The men are there to encourage them. Yes, I've had men mentors. So a lot of my business dealings, I handle like a man instead of a woman, which of course affronts a lot of men. I know the first question I'm usually asked is, who's your CEO? I need to talk to him. And I said, sorry, I'm the CEO. You just have to deal with me. And I said, well, what about your husband? I said, he's dead. And so you still have to deal with me. And I think it's the perception that men are in charge based on our social and cultural upbringing from a couple of thousand years ago that has not changed, but you have made a lot of changes. So I understand that you've put together an organization, actually several of them, to help women entrepreneurs. So why don't you tell our audience about that?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Lillian. Actually, just to go back one step, you just reminded me, one of my earlier businesses in 1994 was floated on the London Stock Exchange. And at the time, I remember handling all the paperwork, and this big sort of pile of papers came from the stock exchange. And it was addressed to gentlemen of the board. And I sent the papers back and I said, I'm terribly sorry, but there's a woman on this board and I expect her to be addressed correctly. And so they had to redo all the paperwork because I insisted upon it. And it came back, lady and gentlemen of the board. And as it happened, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, I was too young and I wasn't really thinking about it. But when the company went public, it just so happened that at that point made me the youngest ever female founder of a publicly quoted company. I'm sure that record has been surpassed since, but at the time it was quite a thing. And, you know, it is that, to get round to answering your question, it is that point of not being afraid to be the first person to break barriers. You know, women can't be it if they can't see it. Nobody can be it if they can't see it. So it's about getting something in front of women that they can identify with. And that's really what led to me starting the first of my organizations to help women entrepreneurs. And I called it Make It Your Business, because I felt that literally it's about getting out there and starting your business. And metaphorically, the message is, no, make it your business to break down the barriers, because you can do this. And so the question was, how are we going to do it? And I thought, actually, it's not that complicated. I'm going to go around the country and I'm going to get local, and that's very important, female entrepreneurs to sit on a panel, and I will invite aspiring female entrepreneurs in. There'll be no charge. It's all completely pro bono. So there are no barriers to entry. And I'm going to get those women to talk about how they started their business. And there's only one rule. And the one rule is that they have to be brutally honest, by which I mean I want to hear the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. And the reason for that is because unless you're authentic and you tell the truth, you are not helping your sisters, your fellow women. You're actually perpetuating an image that is going to be impossible for them to replicate. It's important for anyone starting a business, because as we all know, it's not easy, to understand the pitfalls. Probably more important to understand the pitfalls than it is to understand the good bits. Anyone can run a business when times are good. That goes without saying. It's what you do and how you conduct yourself when it gets tough that is going to distinguish you and determine whether or not you're still in business in 3 years' time.
That and being a good leader. And
yes.
the word leader is very loosely used these days in business. But one of the things that I have found personally, my reputation abroad is I'm ethical, I'm honest, and I help solve problems. And that's the type of reputation one needs to establish themselves as a woman. Now, men have another criteria, but the program isn't about men, so we'll stick with women. And I know that I was one of the very few women who went into broadcast media with an internet talk radio station. In fact, I can say on the number of my hand how many ladies actually do own the stations and are successful. And that's the good and the bad and the ugly. And I know what the ugly is because I'm still struggling with it. But I think that girls are not encouraged to really go and seek what is good for them. The 50s generation where I hail from, you were born to be barefoot and pregnant. And it was your job to renounce that when you got to be 18 or 22 when you got out of university and say, I'm not going to take it anymore. I refuse to be recognized as somebody who's standing behind my husband. Let my husband stand behind me. And that's a very different type of perception, even in the 21st century. So the question is, if you're still encouraging, and I suspect you are, young and old female entrepreneurs, why aren't more of them coming out and declaring that they are women entrepreneurs and taking a stand and saying, here I am?
I think in the UK, and obviously I'm not familiar with US law as I am UK law, there are still some very practical barriers to entry, which, politically we have to sort out. The most obvious of which in the UK is the cost of childcare, which I think I'm saying is amongst the highest in Europe. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was some of the highest in the world. I mean, it is just phenomenally expensive. So if you want to start a business and you realize that you're going to have to, your children will need to be in childcare so that you can focus on that business, you've got to have money. But if you're starting a business, then money is going to be at a premium. You're going to be diverting it into your business. Or you can, try and start your business whilst you're still working. So there's that income coming in. But all of those are limiting actions. And so I think the cost of childcare is a big problem. Confidence is still a big issue. And that's always a very difficult one to talk about, because I meet a lot of very strong women, and particularly younger women these days have I'm glad to say, a different, more confident attitude than perhaps women of the 40s, 50s and 60s. And I was born in the 60s. So, I notice a generational difference. But it is still true that when men and women apply for a job and there are 10 criteria, a woman will say, well, I've only got 9, so I won't apply. And a man will say, well, I've got 5, I can do this job. And, there is a fundamental difference in confidence. So how does one tackle that? I think in terms of entrepreneurship, and I've argued for this very strongly in the UK, it should be taught in schools. Because then what's happening is that not only are you making it, you're normalizing entrepreneurship as a career choice. So it's as normal to talk about wanting to be an entrepreneur as it is to be a doctor, a dentist, or a train driver. But you're also creating an equality from day one. Boys and girls, unless it's a single-sex school, sit in the classroom together, and they're taught equally that it's a valid and noble and fascinating thing to want to run a business. And I think you've got to go back to the beginning, and we've got to get entrepreneurship into education. So I think that's another reason, because we don't in this country. I don't know if you do in America, but we don't in the UK, as far as I know. There might be isolated schools that have little programs, but it's not part of the national curriculum. And so I think that's also a problem. And the third big problem is access to finance.
Yes.
Only 2% of venture capital money goes to female-led businesses. Only 1% of venture capitalists are women. I had a friend who came up with an idea for an app that helps you choose exactly the right bra size. She went to pitch her idea, and she found herself pitching it to 5 men, one of whom said, well, I'm really not sure. I'll go and ask my secretary. It's not helpful. And so I think those are the main areas. And, it is getting better. I'm an ambassador for the British Library Business and IP Centre Network, and 66% of the people they mentor are women. So they are single-handedly batting some of the averages. But it's, or batting away, I should say. But it's one of those things where it's not going to happen overnight. I do see change, but I do see sort of systemic issues, and confidence, I think, is perhaps the most difficult and the most intangible of them.
Well, I know when I went to apply for a loan, they said to me, we can't give you a loan, but we can give you a business line of credit. And I said, what's the difference? It's still a loan. And they said, oh, no, this is a line of credit. And I said, I may be a woman, but I do know how to balance a checkbook. And more importantly, I know that when you take a loan, you're diverting funds from somebody else to give to me. And for the privilege of giving me this money, you assign extra money, which is called interest. Otherwise, you won't get some of your money back. It's like paying back your school loan. Incidentally, I paid mine back. However, I'm not going to take either, because a line of credit, the interest is higher than if you just give me a fixed loan. And I'm insulted that if my brother came along with this idea for a broadcast station, that you would take a look at his credit and say, this is fine, sign here. So what's the difference besides gender?
Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. But what I will say is this. that whilst that has resulted in women tending to have to resort to family, friends, and angel investors largely for their funding, the side or the impact of that has been that women have been a bit more cautious in the way they've built their businesses, because it's a very personal thing when you borrow money from family, friends, and angel investors. And I think, women also by nature are perhaps a little bit more cautious. But the upside of that is that certainly in Britain, statistically, women are more likely to succeed when they found a business than men. We're actually better at it, partly because of the implications of having to borrow the money on that more personal level. I think that probably has something to do with it. Partly because by nature, women are more cautious and look for the long-term growth and stability of their business, because they think more or place more emphasis and value on the welfare of people and the responsibility towards people they might be employing. When I listen to men talking about their business idea, they're talking about the exit before they've even entered, so to speak. It cannot be generating any revenue, and they're talking it up as if it's something. A woman, typically speaking, wouldn't dare do that unless she got something to really show you that has a value. So I think there's a whole sort of language and approach, and we could probably benefit. And I think, again, this goes back to education, benefit by exposing girls in school to more information about the various ways in which you can and should approach building a business. And also, we just have to break down this issue of VC money. Come what may, we have to sort that out, so that girls and boys approach business more equitably in their attitude towards it. One isn't more frightened than the other. And there are always exceptions to the rule, and there are some fantastic examples of very gutsy women who've built big businesses. But typically, women will build smaller businesses, and I think that's fine, because, as I say, if you've got hundreds of thousands of acorns, that's probably more valuable than one big oak tree. So those acorns are all those self-employed, maybe kitchen table businesses around the country. Collectively, they are contributing to the economy. But having said that, I do want to see more women building unicorns. Why not?
I think that women will be more encouraged. Women don't build empires. The women I know who run businesses, a lot of them have gutsies, especially here in the States. One of the things that distinguishes me from most of the guys, as soon as I open my mouth, the first thing they say is, "You're so passionate."
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because women have to fight. They have to be tenacious to get what they want. This is more than just strength, ladies and gentlemen. This is a sincere belief that what you're doing is right. And I hate doing this, but it's similar to God is on my side. Don't get in my way. Yeah. And when I talk about my company, which is an hour, because it really is a team sport, all the women are involved to making it better and great. And I know where I want to go and take it. But men are always very surprised when they hear it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the fact that when boys and girls are brought up in school, they really don't compete. The boys compete among the boys and the girls compete among the girls, but they're not mixed and competing against each other. And again, it does. I agree with you 100%. Education is the key, but I also think that also putting these kids, as they used to do, put them into trade to learn what they're being taught would be beneficial to them, because by the time they get out of the school system, not only do they have the information, the content, and the confidence, but they actually know how to put it to use.
Yeah.
And the educational system in the United States is not all that different from the UK or anybody else for that matter. these kids from Understand Asia have school almost 24/7. And yet, when you put them in the real world, they don't know how to put into practice what they're taught. So it leaves them, both genders, but women especially, at a disadvantage.
Yeah, we have a fairly thriving apprenticeship system in the UK for trades, plumber,
Yeah, for
builder, what
trades.
have you, trades. We should have apprenticeships for entrepreneurs. It goes back to my point about normalizing entrepreneurship as a career choice. Why not? I learned my entrepreneurial skills from the person that I started my first business with. Happened to be a man, because most of them were at the time. But that's how I learned. I accepted that I was going to do most of the work, and he was going to make most of the money, but that was my tuition fee, so to speak, and I accepted that. And to this day, I employ the knowledge and the skill that he taught me, and it was invaluable. It was absolutely invaluable. And these are not things you can read in a book. I don't care how many self-help books you read, it's not in there. So, and I had a great education, so I understand what a good formal education is. But I think there needs to be a place in formal education for that experience of being an apprentice and learning about the real world. So there is a bridge between your academic career and what you need and are expected to do in your real life, so to speak.
So when are we going to start instituting that so that women get that type of hands-on experience that is necessary for them? I don't think elementary school really is the time to do that, but junior high, I don't know if you in the
Yep.
UK have a junior high, but those are usually your 12, 13, and 14-year-old
Yep.
kids. They're on the
Yep.
cusp of trying to declare, I'm an adult, don't treat me like a child. But
Yep.
at the first sign of danger, it's like, oh, mom,
I'd
I
I'd
have a little
start
problem.
I'd
Yeah,
start a little bit earlier, probably. I'd start them around 10 or 11, just very gentle introduction,
I think
to,
so.
and I think that's about the right, the right time. But it's something which I talk about a lot in the UK, and I'm pushing for it. And I do work a little bit in politics, in that I'm not a politician, I'm not an MP, but I do try to make change happen in my area that I'm interested in, which is basically women in the economy. And in fact, we're just, Lilian, we're just launching this year, because we don't have it. But again, that's symptomatic of, why doesn't it exist? We're just about to launch National Women's Enterprise Week, which is going to be a week, June 19 to 23 in the UK, the first time it's ever happened, where we celebrate, support, and encourage female entrepreneurship. And it is about raising the profile and the conversation that is the catalyst for change. And I'm very excited about it, because we've got a lot of support. I think people recognize that change needs to come. And I would just say that it's not just about the individual benefit and interest of the woman concerned who's running the business. When you're running a successful business, it goes without saying, although maybe it does need to be said, it impacts positively on your relationships, on your family, on your economic status, on the what's the word? Not reputation, but what you're teaching your children. They're learning from you, they're looking at you, they're watching that role model. I was having a conversation with my 19-year-old son recently, and he said, Mum, it's really interesting. He said, most things have gone right for you recently, haven't they? Because I always share with him everything that's going on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And I said, yeah, I'm having a good run. But, you remember back 3-4 years when we had this problem or that problem in the business, and they're learning, and they're watching you persevere despite obstacles and issues and problems. And I think it's, you're a role model for them. So there's the sort of immediate impact that a woman running a business, positive impact, has on her family. But then there's the sort of global economic impact. It is a fact that no country, Britain being one of them, the United Kingdom, can reach its economic potential unless women fulfill theirs, because women make up half the population. It's not even I'm not asking for anyone to do me a favor. I don't need anyone to do me favors. I'm saying just put your sensible hat on for the economy of this country and all of our selfish well-being. We want women to be contributing in the way that men are. It's a no-brainer.
Not only that, women have the potential to outlive men 10 to
Very
1.
true. Good
We are
point.
the caregivers,
Yeah,
and the
good point.
caregivers have a tendency to stick around. I mean, people looking at me and saying, "You're such a baby, you'll probably live to your 100." And I said, possibly. I've no plans of departing planet Earth at the moment. But I understand what you're saying. My son owns his own business. He's a world-renowned graphic artist. He's all over the place. And he got a lot of his tenacity and picking himself off the ground and brushing himself off after seeing mom fall. In fact,
Yeah,
mom fell a lot more than standing up
yeah,
most times. But
yeah.
he also understood that you didn't give up and that you paid a price, whether it was in the beginning, middle, or end. There was no such thing as a free thing on planet Earth. You have to
Nope.
pay for it.
It's
And he
true.
learned that at a very early age. I made sure of that. And I think that's one of the toughest lessons for any entrepreneur to learn because it means that it all comes down to them. I told him, I said, in the final analysis, you're the one who makes the choice and you're the one who's responsible for whatever actions come from your consequences.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I think that, they've seen me in despair, they've seen me in tears, they've seen me jubilant. They know that it's not a slow, sure trajectory upwards. Quite the opposite. It's a roller coaster. But they have seen consistency in my approach to the business, which is giving up is a luxury I just can't afford. It is literally a luxury. And I think that that's the lesson I would want them to learn from watching what happens to me on a day-to-day basis. It is about staying the course and being resourceful, resilient, and glass half full, optimistic, just all of those things, all mixed together.
Plus, how to pick yourself up after you fail. You have
Yeah,
to learn how to fail
yeah, yeah,
before you learn how to become successful, which
yeah.
is one of those lessons all entrepreneurs must learn.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I had many businesses that, or parts of businesses or attempts that failed. We tend to focus on our successes because it's nice to talk about them. But yeah, lots of things. I mean, I've been going 30 years. I don't know anybody who's been in business for 30 years who hasn't failed at something. If they tell you they haven't, then I suspect it's a bit of a porky, as we would say. It's not true. And I think that the failure, as painful as it is where you gain your deepest learnings, almost
I
undoubtedly.
agree. So,
Yeah.
Alison, please tell everybody perhaps what your upcoming schedule is. I understand you're coming to the States and waving your hand, and any other remarks or wisdom you would like to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually coming to the States in a few days' time because I launched my business is online retail. And I also started a TV shopping arm to the business. In other words, I sell my brand on television, on TV shopping, which I hugely enjoy. I enjoy the performance aspect of it. So I have been doing that in the UK for 12 years. 2 years ago, I launched in the States on HSN. So I'm coming over this week to Florida to do a show. I'll be launching in Australia in September. And then I'm hoping to complete the global jigsaw with Japan. And then I can say that Alison at Home TV shopping is truly a global enterprise. And the other thing I'm doing, obviously, is launching National Women's Enterprise Week in the UK in June 19th to 23rd. And in my spare time, I like climbing mountains. I just came back from Everest Base Camp. I walked to Everest Base Camp, and I'm hopefully going to do Mount Kenya later this year in Africa. So I try to balance. I try to be physically fit because that's a very important part of the stamina you need to bring to running a business. You need to be physically fit, mentally fit. So that's an important, and you need to know how to relax. So that sort of climbing mountains is a good way to let all the steam off. But I do enjoy the balance of business and politics. And I think the thing I enjoy about politics and would like to do more of is making things happen and effecting change where I think it most needs to happen. And I think that this area of women in enterprise is rich and fertile ground, because whilst we have come a long way, we still have some way to go. We still only have 2 out of every 5 businesses in the UK founded or led by a woman. That's simply not good enough.
I agree with you. I want to see more women-led businesses here in the States, but I think that at the moment, people are still trying to recover from the pandemic and trying to decide how to move forward. And I think, too, that the pandemic brought life and death too close for comfort here in the States. I don't know how it is in Europe, but I know here people died who weren't supposed to die, and other people died or really were seriously affected by the pandemic that got sick. And I think it really threw off the whole balance. But be that as that may, I think it's awesome that you're doing that. And I would like you to know that my radio station is at your service for your Entrepreneur 19th through the 23rd of June. I have the capability to stream it as well if you need
Oh, amazing. That would be fantastic. I'd love that. Absolutely love that. We'll have a separate conversation about that, definitely.
Absolutely. Alison can be reached at Alison at
AlisonCork.com is my email, if that's what you were asking
Yes,
for.
and please tell them the website of your furniture. I was over there this morning, and it looks awesome.
Oh, thank you. It's www.alisonathome.com, and we are literally on the cusp of launching the new version of the website. So give it a few days and you'll see us in all our new beautiful glory.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning with Alison Cork. And you can hear this all over again or see it all over again over at youtube.com/Passionate World Radio _PW Talk Radio. You can also see it at our website, passionateworldtalkradio.com. And I'm not going to name them all, but you can see us all over social media. So thank you all very much for joining us. And Alison, you have any last words for the audience?
I think my last words are not to hesitate. Now is the moment. It's always now, not tomorrow. If you have an idea that you're passionate about, give it a go.
Horace the Roman said, seize the day.
Indeed.
Thank you all very much for listening, and keep alert for our next interview in April.
Thank you very much for having me on.